All right, welcome everybody to the Friends of the Cabildo member lecture series. This is our sixth lecture, and we have another two in June. And then during the month of May, if you've never taken our Neighborhoods of New Orleans class, it's a five-class presentation on the way the neighborhoods of New Orleans built out from the center all the way out to the suburbs. So it's a really, really great class. So I hope you take advantage of that. But tonight we're going to be talking about um, somebody that has been really doing some unbelievable work on New Orleans history. Specifically, I know him best from we sell two of his books at the 1850 House Museum store, which you can go on and you can get a 15% discount as a member. Is the Southern Decadence in New Orleans, which he co-wrote with Friends of the Cabildo tour guide Frank Perez, and then also Unveiling the Muse, which was as he was pointing out to me earlier, a 20-year labor of love, labor,
Sure.
yeah, about documenting for the first time really gay carnival and the role that New Orleans played in gay carnival. And it's both that book and the Southern Decadence book are available at the 1850 House. But what he's going to be talking about tonight? Sorry, let somebody else in. Is another unbelievable cultural influencer in New Orleans on so many levels. And he's written a book about it. His name's Howard Smith, and he's written George Dureau, Life and Art in New Orleans. And we were so excited to have him. And George Dureau is just so well loved in New Orleans, and I'm just excited to hear your take on George, and we're excited for the book. So welcome, Howard.
It's very, very, very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And this is actually my fifth book on the history of New Orleans, and it represents a good decade of research. I really didn't start out thinking that I would do a book on George Dureau. I had heard that his archive was at the his, Historic New Orleans Collection, the Williams Research Center. And while I was there researching another book, I was very curious. So I asked to see what they had, and I was really blown away. There were so many images and so much information that I had never seen before. I had followed George Dureau's career quite a bit. I lived in New Orleans in the 80s, um, and I was involved with the arts community. I'm a photographer as well. I exhibited some of my photography um, at the CAC and Lemieux galleries. And, I would run into George every once in a while at gallery openings, which, it was a monthly um, just carnival almost. There's so many people, so much interesting art. Artists were out. So it was really this uh, must do uh, event really every month. So I saw him out several times and we chatted. I certainly wasn't one of his close friends, but I certainly knew him. And I wasn't very aware of his paintings. I had seen some of them at the Arthur Roger Gallery. And this was kind of his late work, which he himself called buttery. They were very pastel colors. So I thought I would put together a proposal for my publisher, and because I had found so much interesting information and images, most of it unpublished, 90%, 95% unpublished, and so many surprises. Um, which I thought would be very interesting because there are already a couple of books out on Dureau's just photography. They're just photography books. maybe with an essay. They don't really go in depth about his photographs. And what I wanted to do, and what my publisher uh, urged me to do, was to go deeper. And as we had more and more conversations, um, we realized that the art scene during the 80s in New Orleans hadn't really been talked about, and it was spectacular. And Dureau was part of that. He was an integral piece of the puzzle piece with the arts community. So, so I started on the book about 10 years ago, and I really was able to select the photography plates pretty easily. And really, those didn't change over the years. But finding out about the people in the photographs is what I wanted to do. Um, and as we hit in COVID, we were at home for a couple of years. This was a blessing in disguise because I was able to call and interview so many people. And I would call one person, and that person would lead me to another person. So I really got to talk to a lot of people who knew Dureau very well, such as Kenneth Holditch, Bill Fagley, um, a lot of people in town, a lot of people who had moved. It just was a godsend, really. So in the book, you'll be able to read some of those interviews, and they're pretty enlightening, uh, especially in terms of Dureau's personality and his inspirations. So I thought I would start with some images for us to look at, and maybe if you have any questions, you can ask questions about them. These are all plates in the book, and let's get started. Let's see if I can share this. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. This is Dureau working on the mural at Gallier Hall. This is called The Parade Paused. And this particular commission that he's working on is at his Dauphine Street studio. This was probably his best known studio. It was really beautiful. He It was in a lot of magazines. The balcony that wraps around from Barracks to Dauphine Street. He spent a lot of time there. He entertained there, and this is where he did this mural. Now in the book, there's a color reproduction of um, this artwork, especially because some of the people in really all of Dureau's paintings and especially his murals, they're recognizable. Like this flambeau carrier here is one of the models he photographed in his studio. Um, and this just kind of captures, to me, it captures the essence of um, the kind of tumult or just the chaos of a parade as you're experiencing it. And it's so ironic that this artwork is in Gallier Hall where the parade pauses. This title is The Parade Paused. It's also interesting because you can see down here this architectural detail. He's worked it into the composition here. The columns in front of Gallier Hall. Um, just some of the costumes are very, very interesting. Um, this black man here with a clarinet, he photographed several times. And used him in other artworks. Let's move on to the next one. Here's a very interesting photograph. This was taken at George Dureau's first studio in the 60s. Um, he had a second floor apartment, which he converted into a studio. And you can see here his early work with these sort of abstract landscapes, but he quickly abandoned that for his more figurative work. Um, this to me is so interesting because you can kind of see this kind of hip society, 60s society here. Um, and and by the way, this was in a building at 611 Esplanade where the Quorum Coffee House used to be on the ground floor. Now, this was kind of a gathering place for poets and beatniks and also musicians. So there were some black musicians, some white musicians as well. And in 64 is when the civil rights um, law was passed. But before that, the police would harass the coffee house. Um, and eventually, uh, they came in and arrested Dureau for having a crazy party, and they arrested people downstairs as well. So Dureau was arrested. Everyone was eventually acquitted because the civil rights thing happened. And the person who helped them all get off was Dutch Morial before he was mayor. So that's kind of interesting. Now, Dureau resisted arrest. He was also charged with resisting arrest. He was not happy with being arrested. And his complaint was, I I'm not dressed to be arrested. I guess he had some shorts on and a Hawaiian shirt or something. Um, but this was his first studio, and not long after that, he was given his first exhibition at, well, at that time, the Delgado Museum of Art. Now it's the New Orleans Museum of Art. And this was an amazing, prestigious thing to happen to Dureau at this time. He was still just starting out, but he had a huge exhibition here at the museum. And he was on his way. I mean, everyone loved his work. These were mostly paintings and drawings. And I chose this one to show you because the young man here that he's talking to is the artist George Febris, who in the early 80s opened his own gallery and showed some of Dureau's photographs. So this is kind of their early friendship at this museum opening. Now, this is a photograph. This is the first plate in the plate section of the book. This is a photograph Dureau took of his studio um, at the Baldwin Dufour mansion on Esplanade, just beyond the Interstate 10. And it really shows his working method. He would have paintings and drawings up on the wall. He would have reference materials everywhere, open books that he could quickly glance at. He would have, this was a large space for him eventually. He sort of took over this whole place. And he would just have several paintings going, several drawings. And you can see this little it might be a slave quarter back here. Um, and these are just some of the items like this rug he acquired on a trip to Mexico. Um, and he could just spend all of his time working, which he did. He would get up in the morning, he would start working on a painting, trying to complete it, or wake up in the middle of the night and work. So this was really his lifestyle. He would work all the time. Now, this is one of his subjects. I don't think many people would realize, could identify this pretty famous man in the 70s and 80s. I remember he was on talk shows a lot. His name is Quentin Crisp, and he wrote his biography called The Naked Civil Servant. He's British, and he posed nude for art classes during World War II. And this was a civil service job. Um, so his autobiography was made into a movie, and he continued to write books, kind of witty books, if you will. And Dureau was commissioned to do the portrait on the book jacket. And this is very interesting because Crisp looks sort of 19th century. The whole atmosphere looks very 19th century. And what I also wanted to show you in this archive are all the contact sheets for his negatives. And more scholars are looking at these contact sheets as important to begin with, but works of art in themselves. Recently, the Andy Warhol Museum donated to the Stanford Art Gallery, all of his contact sheets. And this was published in a book. They had an exhibition. And it really underlined how important these contact sheets were because they just showed so many people that Warhol had photographed. And although these uh, contact sheets look simple, it really reveals a lot about Dureau's method here because typically photographers will shoot several exposures of one look, I suppose. Um, that is, they would change the setting so they would be sure to get a good exposure. But Dureau was so confident in his process. You can see that each one of these poses they're all different. And this is actually the one in the upper right-hand corner um, that Dureau chose. But you can see all the work I mean, they probably spent all day doing this photo session. Now, this young man is one of Dureau's proteges who wanted to be an artist himself, um, Christopher Fisher. And Dureau met Christopher when he was a young boy at his grandmother's house. Georgia Fisher was his grandmother and had purchased some Dureau paintings. Uh, and while Dureau was there, he sat down and drew Christopher Fisher. And he was so struck by this, of what Dureau could do to portray him. Right there, he decided, I want to do this too. I want to be an artist. Um, and Chris eventually came to New Orleans, um, actually worked for Dureau, and was also a model. Dureau painted him, and he also photographed him. Now, the thing that struck me in particular with this photograph, it's color. You never see Dureau's work in color. He never exhibited his color work, but I think it's fantastic. I interviewed Chris Fisher um, over the course of several years, actually, and he shared a lot of information with me about Dureau, and his interview is in the book. Sadly, he passed away at the end of last year with pancreatic cancer. So, um, ironically, I never got to meet him because, we talked on the phone. He lived in Arkansas, but he was going to come down to the book launch events in New Orleans, and he will not be able to, sadly. And here's the contact sheet. Um, you can see that Dureau is probably telling him, move your head to the left just a little bit or to the right to get a profile. Um, and here's a different backdrop. This blue blanket sort of accentuates his blue eyes. Also, a surprise to me was that Dureau photographed women. And this is a very famous model in New Orleans during the 80s. Her name was Kathy Baudouin. And she posed as a model for artists. And she became very well known. She was very successful. And there was an exhibit of portraits of her by various artists. That was an exhibit at CAC, I think in 1983. And so Dureau photographed her for that exhibit. Dureau did a lot of photographs with flags, with American flags. He did a lot of photographs of her, and here is a color one, which I find really interesting. Um, so Dureau just took some of these dried flowers and used them as an arrangement. I can just see him in his studio just wandering through all of his rooms and just picking up things for his setups here. Um, Again, surprisingly in color. This is very interesting too. This guy is David Cope. He was a football player. Um, and he played for a year for the New Orleans Saints. I think he played for the San Francisco team the longest. Um, and while he was in New Orleans, I think it was 71, Dureau met him and photographed him quite a bit. And Cope is pretty famous for writing his autobiography with the help of a friend because he came out as a gay man um, after he retired from football. He was the first one to ever do this, so it was like a bestseller. Um, I talked to David. He's still alive. He's living in Palm Springs now, but I had met him. I guess it was around 2000. I had gone to this linoleum warehouse building on Santa Monica Boulevard to look for some flooring. And then I remembered that he worked there and he came over and helped me. A very nice chap. He's just very soft-spoken, very interesting. Um, and Dureau does a great job of capturing him. This is probably one of his most famous models. If you've looked at any of Dureau's photography books, you will see BJ Robinson. BJ, I remember seeing BJ Robinson on the streets. Um, he doesn't have any legs, and he would get around on a skateboard. Now, I went to the Golden Lantern, which is a bar on Royal Street, and I would walk in, and BJ would be sitting on the bar. Now, how he got up on the bar, I don't know. But BJ was in and out of Dureau's life quite a bit. And the story was that he was from the Midwest and that he was born, I think he was a thalidomide baby, and that he did have some malformed appendages for legs. And the doctors decided to amputate those. And BJ was always angry about that because he told Dureau, I could have used those to get around. They would have been very helpful for me. Even though they weren't full legs, they would have helped him. Um, yeah, Dureau was very close to BJ. And here they are together for this shot. You can see that he's just a torso here. Um, but he never felt sorry for himself. And Dureau was the first to say that. He said BJ somehow would travel all over. Um, they met in New York. Dureau went out with a friend to Washington Square on a Sunday because there's a lot of people, music, that type of thing. And he saw BJ through the people and went up and started talking to him. And several months later, I guess Dureau told him he lived in New Orleans. Several months later, BJ was at Dureau's door, and he definitely could get around. I don't know how he would do that. Maybe he hitchhiked. I don't know. This is an interesting series that I thought everyone would be interested in. Of course, Dureau is most famous for photographing nude black men, and Dureau saw this image in National Geographic of where this tribe in Africa, um, they had wrestling matches, and the guys that won, they would be covered with ash as a reward. So Dureau was really interested in that, this sort of erasure of race, if you will. And so he started experimenting with that. This is actually flour that he put on several models. And then he and his assistant would paint as these African tribesmen would do. They would do these colorful paints, um, like tattoos on the body. Um, I haven't found any color photos of this, but this is really a series of about 20 photographs. I put, 5 or 6 of these in the book. Here they are posing. They're sort of wrestling um, with these iron pincers, which are used in glass making, glass blowing, I think. Um, okay, well, that's enough of that. And here's the thing that really blew me away. He photographed the circus when it was in town. And by looking at all these photographs, there's a lot of like American flags and bunting and elephants with the flag on it. And I realized that this was 1976. So Dureau was here watching the circus. Now, what's really interesting about this is Dureau is behind the scenes. He's not up in the stands up here where the people are sitting. He was behind the scenes getting to know these people like midgets. And it just makes sense that Dureau would be drawn to the circus, to these people that he was really interested in, these sort of outcasts. The circus was its own little universe here. And fantastic photos. Here he captures these trapeze artists so well. They're right at the right moment. It's just so incredible. And here you can see flags and the MC here with the tigers. He's right. Giroux is right here up at that stage photographing. He photographed a lot of midget clowns. Um, and in his studio, he photographed midget wrestlers. That's another thing he was interested in. This is the last of the 100 plates. Dro actually went to a tent revival, and this was before it started. I think they had them at night. And he photographs this tent from the outside, but his photograph from the inside is just so beautiful. Um, it's such a great composition with all the lines and the light kind of bleeding in. I thought this was um, really atypical of Dureau, but really beautiful to see it. Uh, Now, another section of the book, as I was talking about the art scene in New Orleans, we decided to have a special section with artists that were influential during this time, as Dureau was influential. And some of these artists showed at George Febres's gallery, also at George DeVille's gallery, which is another important gallery, and Arthur Roger Gallery. This artist is Jacqueline Bishop, and she has taken as her theme in most of her work the destruction of nature. So she writes about, she traveled to Brazil, and from her notebooks, she uses a lot of this vegetation and birds, uh, some birds that are extinct. So she really has a focus in her work with all of the fish. It's just like nature is what's happening here. Um, all during the 80s, she painted um, along this theme, and this is in the early 90s, and I think it's a culmination of all that work. Very surreal. There's a surrealistic slant to her work for sure. And this is someone that probably everyone would recognize. This is Doug Bourgeois. Bourgeois and I are old friends. We used to hang out in the early 80s and in the French Quarter. And this is a fantastic painting by him. It's called The Woman from Gonzales. And it's almost a Medusa here with the snakes and the vegetation, the caterpillars. Um, it seems a little terrifying, but Doug says that anytime nature is enveloping one of his figures, it's like nature trying to protect someone. So you have Jacqueline who works along the theme of nature being destroyed, and here Doug is um, talking about nature in terms of uh, as a as a protector, I suppose. I love this painting. And also, sorry, this is there's a section on other photographers who were important during the 80s. This is Josephine Sacabo, and she is photographing Kathy B as her model. And this is a really interesting story. I contacted Josephine. I remembered she had an exhibit at Mario Villa, probably like 1984, and it was a nude woman was the model for in all of these photographs, and I really enjoyed those photographs. There's probably like 15 of them. So when I contacted Josephine, this was many years ago, probably about 5 years ago. First of all, she said she wasn't very interested in uh, participating in my book, and I kept calling her and kept calling her, and I told her there are these photographs of a nude woman that you did back in the 80s. And she said, "Oh, I don't remember that. I don't know what you're talking about." And then I heard that she was ill. Um, but I kept trying to get in touch with her, trying to convince her. And I did this a lot, by the way, for this book. It was sometimes you just have to be persistent, and I am. Well, her assistant emailed me back and she said, "We're going to go to the studio. We're going to go through everything, and we'll see if we can find this stuff." Well, I got this crazy email, and the assistant said that Josephine was just ecstatic that she found these photographs and that they were some of her favorite photographs, even though she didn't remember them. So there are about six of these in the art in this photography section. Um, this painting is a depiction of the god Bacchus. This was commissioned from Dureau um, for the restaurant Arnaud's and they have a Bacchus room, and this painting is prominent in the Bacchus room. And I was just surprised to find this there, and it's so great. It's so carnival in my mind. Bacchus, the crew of Bacchus, and this after the book came out, the book has only been out what a couple of weeks. A friend called me up and said, "You have a photograph of this guy, Carlos Moreno, in the photography section." And I'm pretty sure that he was the model for this painting. And it was. So I keep finding things out. It'll probably be never ending, but that was too late for the book. And this is the last slide. This is Dureau's famous Dauphine Street studio. You can see the joyous chaos in his studio where he's working on so many things. This is a Tina Freeman photograph, by the way, and she's in the photography section as well. Um, and they were friends. Freeman she was great friends with Dureau. I think she exhibited some of his work at her gallery in the mid 70s, I believe. Um, So I thought we would end here and see if you all have any questions.
I do. If you have questions, please put them in the chat.
Put them in the chat.
I'd love to ask them, but if not, I've got questions. Um, when you were talking about the 1980s art gallery,
Uh-huh.
I'm very interested in this scene. Um, was it all in the French Quarter? Was it on Julia Street? Was there a move from the French Quarter to Julia Street? Did Julia Street give this legitimacy to the art in general? I'm just interested in this kind of this scene that was happening during that time.
That was an important question for me because I actually saw this transition. I was part of it. Uh, a lot of what I first talk about is before Julia Street.
Hmm.
So there were galleries in the French Quarter. And of course, there were some on Magazine Street. Arthur Roger, his first gallery was on Magazine Street.
Okay.
And then there was the World's Fair. I have a brief section on the World's Fair where they had an art exhibit space where
Okay.
Dureau exhibited, Doug Bourgeois was in that show. And right that developed the warehouse district.
Right.
It was like a rundown mess, before that. Um, and that's when Julia Street started. So, for example, Arthur moved to Julia, Lemieux Galleries moved to Julia from Algiers Point, Simone Stern moved from the French Quarter to Julia Street. That became the main focus because of the CAC. That was kind of the
And
anchor.
there was legislation for the taxing and all that kind of stuff like that that happens over there as well too. But also the CAC as well. That I mean, it almost feels like you almost had like a white linen night every night. I want to be part of this scene.
You know, I've done the white linen before. I love that. It was when the galleries had openings, they all coordinated it, and it seemed
Yeah.
like there were 20 or 30 of them. And you would see your friends, and you would see great art, and it was just you would really get excited, inspired by all of this work, and it was really incredible work appearing in the galleries at this time.
Can you talk a little bit about the research work and what were your, main sources for, what what archives had a lot about on him, or did you have to go mostly private? How did that work?
That's a loaded question because I did so much in research. I leave no stone unturned. Of course, the core of my uh, research was at the Historic New Orleans Collection in
Right.
Dureau's archive. George Febris has an archive there. But during COVID, I spent probably a year looking through the files of the Times-Picayune, which is NOLA.com now, the Advocate.
Yeah.
And I found all of these really important photographs. I didn't use all of them, but I just started collecting them. And a lot of those are period photographs from the 80s because I wanted this book to be visual as well as um, telling the story about all this. So
And there were photographs of that Dureau took, or there were photographs of that scene.
it was of the scene.
Okay.
There was some photographs of Becky Allen. There were photographs of the circus, which dovetailed into his photographs of the circus. There were photographs of Arthur Roger Gallery, just all over the place.
Mhm.
Um, and they weren't cheap either. So I spent quite a lot on just getting those photographs. Um, I
Uh,
did find a lot of work in private hands.
mhm.
And that was just a series of coincidences. Friends would call me up and say, I went to this person's house for a drink and there was a Dureau there. So I ended up engaging a photographer in New Orleans. He actually works for the museum. His name is Seth. And he would go to people's houses and photograph the artworks in their houses. And sometimes we would have to go and pull artworks to, like at Jacqueline Bishop's studio. Doug brought some work and some friends brought some work. So and this was up to the last minute. I mean, he finally photographed a large piece at Brobson Lutz's house on Dumaine. The book had already been submitted, so we had to get that in there. Um,
It was that good.
Seth,
It was that good.
yeah, it was just a lot of digging. It was a lot of contacting people, and they would give me leads on people that knew something or that had artwork. Um, sometimes these people didn't get along. There was a horrible divorce settlement, divorce in some of this, and like, do I dare talk to this person?
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
um,
All complicated. It's all complicated.
yeah, the book is hard enough, but kind of navigating these landmines was kind of interesting too. So.
Well, it's all within a 13 by 7 block radius too. That also seems to probably be stuff gets around.
Here's a story for you. Um, I had just started doing my serious research on Dureau, and I was in New Orleans. I think this was in the fall one year. This is a long time ago, 2018 maybe. And some friends had told me about Robson and that he knew Dureau and that I should talk to him. Well, I contacted him and he said, "Well, when you're in town, come by for drinks." So my plane was late and I barely got to our rendezvous on time. So I was really stressed. So I walk in and Brobson had invited other people to this cocktail party, which it turned out to be a catered dinner. So I didn't expect that. Um, and one of the guests was the writer John Barrett, who did Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, if you remember that. And so we sit down, we're having some wine. We haven't started eating yet. And John just kind of leaned over the table. He was sitting right across from me and he said, "Who the hell do you think you are that you can write the book on George Dureau?" And so without missing a beat, I just said, "Because I want to get to all the dirt." So everyone laughed. It kind of broke the ice, and then we started talking. And I did uncover a lot of dirt, but I couldn't publish it. A lot of scandals.
Bill asked, did George move his studio over time?
He did. That was an interesting part of the research. His first studio was on the lower part of Esplanade. That got sold, so he had to move to Rampart for a couple of years. Then he moved back to Esplanade at the Baldwin Dufour Mansion at 1707 Esplanade. And then when that got sold, he had to move to Rampart, to Dauphine, sorry. He lived there until Katrina, and then he had to leave Dauphine, and his last studio was on Bienville.
Okay.
So it was, he never owned these places, but when they were sold, he had to move. And luckily, he found uh, really great places to have his studio.
Um, Final question. So where can you go see George Dureau art? Maybe out for free, maybe for a museum ticket, in New Orleans in general, maybe around the country where if someone wanted to see some George Dureau, what are their options here in New Orleans?
Well, from time to time, there are exhibitions. We have been talking about, um, and this is very preliminary, but there's probably something in the works because as I was interviewing people, some people had a lot of Dureau photographs and they donated these photographs to, let's say, the Ogden, to the HNOC. And so we could see something soon. The Historic New Orleans Collection had a small exhibit a couple of years ago for Prospect, and the Arthur Roger Gallery has from time to time. I think Arthur had an exhibit 2018 of Dureau and Maplethorpe. I didn't even get in. Maplethorpe and Dureau were friends, so or frenemies. So that's another story.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Well,
Um, it's interesting. I'm going to be talking in San Francisco in June. There's a Dureau exhibit in San Francisco. So the audience will be kind of different because here, most people know who Dureau is in New Orleans. But on the West Coast, they don't really know. So I'm really hoping that, especially since people are starting to exhibit his work, that he's going to become more well known. I think he's more well known in Europe than here, really, outside of New Orleans.
well, that's fascinating. I'll be in San Francisco. Which museum, Tom says?
Um, let's see, it's at the Bob Miser Foundation, and the exhibit is up until the end of June.
There you go. I hope that
And
works out for you.
there's about 25 images, and they're really good photographs.
Very neat. Well, Howard, I want to thank you so much. This was really, really interesting, and I'm excited for the book. I put some links on there to all the books we offer in the store, also the George Dureau book, and I'll send all that stuff out as well with the recording tomorrow for those who aren't on here live. So I hope everyone um, enjoyed the lecture, and we'll see you at the next one in June. And also, if you take the member lectures, I mean the neighborhoods class, we hope to see you in May. So thanks so much, Howard. We appreciate it, and
It's been a
congratulations.
pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.